This is Mr. Eugene, and today I'm speaking directly to the men in this audience. Because today we're talking about something that determines whether your relationship thrives or slowly dies. Not infidelity, not some dramatic betrayal. Something far quieter and far more common. The gradual loss of leadership in your own relationship. I want to start with something that's going to sound controversial to modern ears, but is observably true if you actually look at the relationships around you. Relationships work best when the man leads, not dominates, not controls through force. Leads, sets the direction, holds the structure, makes the decisions about what the relationship is and isn't, what it includes and what it doesn't. When a man holds that position genuinely, relationships tend to be stable, satisfying, and built to last. When a woman ends up holding that position instead, even though almost nobody planned for that to happen, relationships tend to become unstable, resentful, and eventually unsatisfying for both people involved. I've watched hundreds of relationships over the years, talked to countless men about what's working and what isn't in their marriages and partnerships, and here's what I've noticed consistently. The genuinely happy relationships, the ones where both people seem content and the dynamic feels easy rather than exhausting, are vanishingly rare. And in nearly every one of those rare, happy relationships, the man is the one holding the direction of the relationship, not the woman. This isn't an accident. Despite what modern messaging tells men, most women are not actually looking for a partner who defers to them on every decision and follows their lead in every domain. Most women want a man they can respect, look up to, and trust to guide the relationship somewhere worth going. But here's the uncomfortable truth. In the overwhelming majority of relationships, it's the woman who ends up in control, not the man. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this corresponds almost exactly with how rare genuine relationship satisfaction has become. So, if relationships work better when men lead, why does control end up with women so often? There are two main paths this happens through, and understanding both is essential. The first path happens right from the very beginning. Some men, recognizing they may not be the most naturally attractive or compelling option in a woman's life, offer her control as a kind of trade. They essentially say, without ever saying it directly, I will let you run things if you'll be with me. This works in the short term because women respond to immediate gratification just like everyone else does. A woman who isn't getting what she wants from more attractive or compelling men might accept a relationship where she gets to dictate terms with a man who's willing to hand her that control from day one. These men understand, consciously or not, that keeping the peace by giving her control is simply the price of admission. They've decided that having a relationship on her terms is better than not having one at all. The problem is, this foundation never produces genuine respect or lasting satisfaction. A relationship built on one person surrendering their position from the start rarely becomes something either person is genuinely happy in over the long run. But this is actually the less common path. The second path is far more common and far more insidious because it happens to men who started out doing everything right. Most men, in the earliest stages of dating someone, naturally lead. Think about your own first date with your wife or your current partner. Chances are you had a plan. I'd like to take you here, at this time, on this day, and here's what I'd like us to do. And she said yes to that plan. You created something and invited her into it. It's extremely unlikely she would have agreed to date you if you hadn't done that. And it's even less likely that she went through the trouble of designing an experience and inviting you into it instead. That's simply not how attraction tends to work in the early stages. So here's an important truth that often goes unspoken. Most relationships start with the man holding the direction. That's actually part of why she's there in the first place. Women generally respond to and reward men who create structure and direction for them to enter into. They don't typically chase down men who refuse to do this or can't do this. If that's true, then how does control slip away from so many men who started out doing exactly the right things? It happens gradually, through small concessions made over months and years, each one seemingly reasonable in isolation, that slowly transfer the direction of the relationship from him to her without either person fully realizing it's happening. There are two primary ways this temptation to surrender direction shows up. The first is in response to emotional pressure. A woman wanting more control or more of something specific will sometimes apply emotional pressure to get it. This can look different ways. Sometimes it's expressed disappointment that makes him feel guilty. Sometimes it's visible hurt that makes him feel like he's failed her. Sometimes it's anger that makes him want to avoid the conflict entirely. Sometimes it's a kind of quiet withdrawal that makes him anxious about the state of the relationship. Whatever form it takes, The man facing this pressure often surrenders some piece of his direction simply to escape the discomfort of the moment. He's not agreeing because he genuinely believes she's right. He's agreeing because saying no feels harder than saying yes in that particular moment. In its most extreme form, this becomes an actual threat, explicit or implied. If you don't do this, I'm leaving. And many men, faced with that threat, fold completely rather than risk losing the relationship. The second way control slips away doesn't come from outside pressure at all. It comes from inside the man himself. This happens when a man becomes deeply emotionally invested in a woman, and that investment distorts his thinking. This typically shows up in one of two ways. Sometimes it activates a kind of romantic idealism that makes him want to sacrifice more and more of himself for her. He starts believing that real love means giving up everything, including his own direction and judgment, in service of making her happy. Other times it shows up as a pull toward what feels like fairness. The idea that a healthy relationship means absolutely equal decision-making in every area, constant negotiation, neither person ever leading because that would feel unequal. This second one might sound appealing in theory, and many people would say they believe in it if you ask them directly. But here's what's worth noticing. Think back to how the relationship actually started. She didn't enter the relationship because the two of you collaboratively designed an experience together from the very beginning. She entered because he created something and invited her into it. Women respond to and reinforce that structure by saying yes to it. And men who abandon that structure later, believing they're being more fair or more loving, are often undermining the very dynamic that attracted her in the first place. So how does this actually play out moment to moment in a real relationship? Let me walk you through what I call the critical moment, the point where everything starts to shift. This moment happens when two conditions are both true. First, the man has become genuinely emotionally invested in the relationship. Second, the woman wants something, directly or indirectly, that he doesn't actually want to give. The request can be enormous. Let's get married right now even though you're not ready. Let's move in together faster than feels right to you. Or it can be tiny. Let's spend every single weekend with my friend group. Let's go to that event you have zero interest in. Here's what's important to understand. If the man wasn't emotionally invested, none of this would be a problem. He'd simply say no, the way you'd say no to a request from someone you weren't deeply attached to. He's not risking anything he can't afford to lose. But once a man crosses a certain threshold of emotional investment, something shifts internally. He starts to believe he can't say no anymore, even when he genuinely wants to. Not because he's incapable of forming the words, because he's now afraid of what might happen if he does. He fears her disappointment, fears the discomfort of watching her upset or angry, fears, somewhere underneath it all, that saying no might cost him the relationship entirely. And once that fear takes hold, he stops operating from his own authentic judgment. He starts operating from a defensive crouch, constantly trying to manage her emotional state instead of trusting his own direction. Here's the problem with that fear. It's lying to you, and it only takes a moment of honest reflection to see through it. If you genuinely needed to give her everything she wants in order to keep her from leaving, she would have left a long time ago. Think about it. There have already been moments where you didn't give her exactly what she wanted, and you're still here. The relationship survived those moments. In fact, it's likely those very moments where you held your own direction instead of folding are part of why she respects you and stayed in the first place. There's no actual evidence that holding your position threatens the relationship. There's substantial evidence from your own history together that holding your position is part of what's kept the relationship strong. This is exactly why men need to maintain their direction throughout the relationship, not just in the early dating phase. This is what I will do. This is what I won't do. And she gets to decide whether she wants to be part of that structure or not. That's not controlling her. That's simply being a man with genuine direction. The same kind of man she was originally attracted to. Now, will she sometimes be frustrated or disappointed when she doesn't get exactly what she wants? Absolutely. And that's completely fine. She's allowed to feel disappointed. You don't need to fix that feeling for her. You don't need to rescue her from every uncomfortable emotion. She's a capable adult. She can handle being disappointed without it destroying her, and without it destroying the relationship. Here's something worth understanding clearly. It is always easier to hold your direction the first time a pattern starts than after it's been repeated and reinforced for months or years. The earlier you catch yourself folding, the easier it is to correct course. The longer a pattern of concession continues, the harder it becomes to reverse. This isn't unique to relationships. Think about any position of genuine responsibility. A good employer cannot give every employee everything they believe they deserve, even though most employees genuinely believe they deserve more. If an employer caved to every demand, the business would collapse, and then nobody would have a job at all, including the people who made the demands. There's a similar balance in relationships. Give a woman absolutely everything she wants, and you risk the relationship becoming unsustainable, built on a foundation that can't hold real weight. Give her too little, and she may become frustrated and walk away. But here's the key insight. The second outcome, while uncomfortable, is far less destructive than the first. A relationship that occasionally disappoints someone can survive and even strengthen. A relationship built on one person surrendering everything eventually collapses entirely. The price of getting most of what you genuinely want out of a relationship is the willingness to occasionally accept that you won't get absolutely everything you want. And the price of holding your direction is occasionally tolerating her disappointment without folding to fix it. Here's something worth remembering clearly. A woman who genuinely sees you as her best option, the man worth being with, is not going to leave simply because you told her no on something reasonable. But the more you say yes to things you don't actually want, simply to avoid conflict or disappointment, the more expensive and exhausting that relationship becomes for you over time. Catering constantly to her preferences, usually because you've become too emotionally invested to risk her displeasure, gradually transfers the direction of the relationship from you to her. And that transfer, almost without exception, marks the slow beginning of the relationship's decline. The good news is this can absolutely be prevented. It starts with recognizing the fear when it shows up, noticing the moment you're about to say yes to something you don't actually want, simply because saying no feels uncomfortable, and choosing in that specific moment not to surrender to that discomfort. This isn't about becoming harsh or rigid or impossible to negotiate with. It's about remembering that you earned her respect and her presence in your life by having genuine direction in the first place. And that direction is worth protecting, one decision at a time, rather than slowly giving it away, one small yes after another, until you no longer recognize the relationship you're standing inside of. Men, can you remember the moment you started saying yes to things you didn't actually want, just to avoid the discomfort of saying no? Subscribe for the honest conversations that help good men recognize the patterns before it's too late to change them.